Well, sunshines, glad you're back. What we got for you today is we've moved the cylinder forward on this 026, offset the cylinder. We had some big gains, I'll tell you that right now, and we're not going to get into the saw today, running it in the dyno and everything else. I'll let you know that right now. But there's some major considerations of how that affected the saw. And that's what I'm going to go over with you today. We get a little bit in depth, and I dumbed it down the best I can. Not because you guys are dumb, but because I am. And I had to find out a way that if somebody was explaining it to me, that I would understand it. Basically, I explained it how I understand it, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, guys. So if it's dumbed down a little bit too much, I apologize. It rained last night, and the 2 days previous to that, put in a 16-hour day and a 12-hour day putting up hay. Guys, it's that time of year where my time starts getting pretty well spoken for. So I'll just edit these videos when I can. I've got a bunch of hay baling videos coming up whenever I can get them together, but please bear with me. I'll get the next chainsaw video out because I don't want to make you guys wait on that. I'm not trying to bait and switch and tease stuff and not show up. So I'll get the chainsaw and the dyno running video out just as soon as I'm able on that too. We've got more upcoming stuff chainsaw related. Of course, we'll have some hay season and stuff like that coming up too. We cut the squish on the new cylinder because we've scored that old one. The caveat to that old one is it's still usable. It's not at peak, but it's still usable. I'm down on static compression from 174 psi to about 150 psi. So we've lost potential, but it's still good for testing rings and things like. It's not great for testing rings, but I'm gonna test some rings with it. I got 5 sets of rings coming because we're still doing some more ring testing. Now the new cylinder coming up, I've got a piston ready that I want to try on the rings, and I'll probably run that in that other cylinder too. But it'll go in this here cylinder as long as I don't score it up or mess it up. We're gonna cut the squish a little bit different, guys. I've come up with a consideration on squish that I think is going to make everybody happy. You got the camp over here that doesn't want to do any machine work. You got the camp over here that only wants to do machine work, not mess with the transfers. And they're probably both right in their own sense of what they're wanting or what they're willing to give up to get this. I've got a consideration on the squish, and I'm going to try to prove out. And I think I've come up with something. I've told one other guy about it, but I haven't told too much about it. I think that may be earth-shattering in the chainsaw world. That or I might be wrong. But I think I'm right. I really do. Driving around for 16 hours on a hay tractor, just watching stuff happen and letting stuff roll through your mind, you come up with some aha moments, and I think I got one on the squish. Like I say, we're going to test rings. I'm going to mod. I was talking to a good friend of mine that I've met through YouTube. Boy, I don't know why he's so gracious enough to talk to me the way he does, because he's just out of my class by everywhere. But I was talking to him about leak tester, and I think I got a mod to do that, make that better for chainsaw applications. And speaking of chainsaw applications, there's my boring bar for cutting squish. That's something else I told him, and he hadn't considered it. I just let chickens tape on a daggum wireless endoscope, and I'll show you that when I cut this. But I can see this cutter all the way inside there, and it focuses so close. I can see a couple thousandths of an inch gap in there. I can see what, guys, if you got a mini lathe and don't have a DRO and stuff, there's just a little hack there that might help you out. Another hack that helped out, I can center up my jig with a 3-jaw chuck, and on a mini lathe, it'll clamp inside this bore. I just use a finished bore sprocket because I got them laying around from other projects, and they're pretty well parallel. So I can mount this fixture in a 3-jaw chuck, and then I bridge this hole here, and I let that cylinder rest on that boss, so I can move the back end. I can move the back end like you would with a 4-jaw chuck, and then I can move these bolts. I can center this up just as though I had a 4-jaw chuck in my 3-jaw chuck. And I'll show you that when I cut the squish. And of course, we still haven't got to the cut off and milled out choke levers and stuff, or choke that we're going to put on that other cylinder. Guys, we got a lot of stuff coming up. If you want to see some of this stuff, subscribe, hit the like if I earned it, don't if I didn't. I get that. But we got some stuff coming up, and we got some hay baling stuff coming up. You might like to see how I do it. I put up 45 tons of hay, got it in the barn in 2 days by myself. If you want to see how I do stuff like that, you know, there you go. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the video. Guys, it's hay season. You know what that means. I was mowing hay today, so I had lots of time to sit there and think, just watch the hay mower go around and around. Well, what's that mean? That means while I was sitting here getting my tedder ready for tomorrow, enjoying a couple of my vices, I was leaning up against the saw shed door, and I think I got a good way to explain this offset cylinder part of it to you. Follow me over here. I want to show you. Guys, I want you to think of my torso as the piston, my legs as the connecting rod. That wall is the intake side, the inside of the cylinder. I'm inside the cylinder. This is the intake side for our demonstration here. Now, when I'm standing up and my connecting rod's pretty well straight, I don't have to put any pressure against this intake wall to keep myself vertical. I've got all 250 pounds of my fat butt pushing straight down on the soles of my shoes, right? But we can't rotate the crank there because we're straight down. So we start moving out a little bit, but we got to keep our back to the cylinder wall because we're stuck here, right? The torso's stuck, it's cylinder, it can't come forward with my feet. So when we get to about 10 or 15 degrees, we've still got some pretty good weight, and we're getting a little bit of pressure on our back. I couldn't have an egg in my back right now, or it'd break it. But it ain't terrible, but it's some. And out here at about 15 degrees, that's about where you want the major fire kernel to hit. That's where you want about the most power to be. And that's shoving us down. Now, as we shove down, I start getting less pressure down. There ain't 250 pounds sticking down anymore. I'm not pushing down on the crankshaft out hard. I'm pushing out by quite a bit because I can feel my feet sliding to the end of my shoes, right? And you guys have seen that on 4-stroke rods, in cars and hot rods. They don't put the cap right on the end. They put her off to the side. And why is that? Part of it's because at this point, we're actually shoving a lot that way. Okay, trying to rotate that crank. We're not putting it straight down on it. We don't have the good torque angle anymore. And plus, whenever you have pressure that way, you got an equal and opposite pressure this way to hold it, which is my back up against the intake wall. Okay, and we know that the piston wears on the intake side because the power stroke's shoving up my legs. It's shoving me this way, right? Now, the farther I get down here, the more pressure I got on my back. It feels like it may pop right now. I've been riding a hay tractor all day. The more pressure I got on my back, the less pressure I got on the soles of my shoes, and the more pressure I got up here. My toes are just wrinkling these house slippers plumb out, and I'm not to the end of my stroke yet, right? So then we get down here to 90 degrees, and that's the end of my stroke. I've got an astronomical amount of pressure on my back. My feet don't have enough down pressure. They just feel like they could slip right out from under me. Like I say, the rod caps on 4-strokes, they're offset to handle this pressure at this. We're actually pushing out harder on that crankshaft than we are down, right? Okay, so all these things together. Now, let's move this in. We're going to call that about 3%, which is what I moved this cylinder forward. It was too hard to move the building, so I just moved the crankshaft back, right? Well, now, when she starts firing, I've still got 250 pounds of my fat butt on the balls of my shoes, and she's firing, and we're out here at about 10%. We may want a little bit less timing, right? That piston's coming down. We may not want that 10 degrees timing we had earlier. We'll have to play with that. I don't know yet. So we move this cylinder forward. Well, now the center line of this crank's moved back. I'm at top dead center, but the center line of this crank's moved back. Okay, and as soon as I fire, as soon as that piston fired, before I ever got stood straight up, as soon as that piston fired, on a normal engine, you want that fire kernel, you want the major part of that to hit when the crankshaft's at about 15 degrees of rotation, past top dead center, so that you've got a little bit of a mechanical advantage for that piston to push that crankshaft down. Everybody talks about, in that offset video, everybody talks about the piston speeding up and slowing down. Well, don't think about it that way on the downstroke. Think about it as a crankshaft piston. The crankshaft's speeding up and slowing down, the piston's being drove. The crankshaft ain't driving the piston's driving the crankshaft. Think about it, you need to think about it the other way. That guy had it a little bit wrong on the power stroke. The piston ain't speeding up and slowing down. The piston has more mechanical advantage over the crankshaft, and it's actually speeding it up because it's farther closer to being right over the outside. It's farther from the center line, right? So when we get out here at about 45 degrees, I've still got most of the weight on my balls of my feet. Now I ain't changed. I ain't went on a diet. I'm still 250 pounds. I still don't have much here. Now I can start getting out here, and I'm saving this equal and opposite pressure off the toes of my shoes and my back. I'm saving that, and I'm turning that into vertical force down on the soles of my feet, which is torque, which is horsepower. And then I get plumb out here. Now I can hold this. I'm not pushed back against this hard, and I'm not pushed out against my toes hard. And actually I'm closer to that center line, so whenever I break over that 90, I'm still over it. So I still have a downward force, but it's still wanting to break out laterally, but not as hard. Okay? And then it starts coming down. It's actually, I'm still coming down because, well, I can't get this thing to rotate down below ground level. But you see where I'm going with that. And that's also, while I'm on the subject, that's also, if I had longer legs, it'd be like having a longer connecting rod. That also changes that angle too. If my butt was up here and we didn't change the crankshaft any, my back pressure wouldn't be near as high up there, right? It'd just move everything up. But that's different. But it ties in, guys. Between 90 and 135 is pretty inefficient. Between 45 and 90 is pretty inefficient. But when we move this cylinder forward, we gain some efficiency on that. And we'll also have gained some efficiency between 90 and 100. We'll have gained a little bit of efficiency there in that sweet spot, or that long spot where we're actually pushing out harder than we're pushing down. We can bring that together and push down harder and out less hard. Make sense? Probably not. It makes sense to me. Guys, we're going to start going over these numbers here, and I got a bunch of them, and I think I've got it down here where we can look at it. But I want to give you something to think about in the meantime. It's an old joke. It's pretty clean. The old guy, he got 3 wishes, right? But the caveat of them 3 wishes was, whatever he got, his enemy got twice as good. And he had this guy he really hated. So the first wish, he said, I want to have the most money in the world. And Genie said, well, all right, but you realize you really won't have the most money because your enemy, he's going to have twice as much. Yeah, I get it. But I still want the most money in the world. So poof, he had the most money in the world, except for his buddy who had twice as much. All right, what do you want for your second wish? He said, well, I want the nicest looking, sweetest dispositioned woman that's the best cook, the most understanding, beautimous, all that. I said, all right, but you realize your buddy's woman's going to be twice as good that he gets. Yeah, I get it. All right. I said, what do you want for your third wish? He said, I want you to beat me half to death. Guys, that's what we're dealing with here. We got to figure out how to beat this chainsaw half to death because we got half of us on one side of the stroke and half of us on the other. Now, I just drew a couple lines down here because I want to refer back to that other pretty famous video Driving for Answers put out. And it's a good video on an offset cylinder. Number one, he put out some real good information. A couple things that I disagree with, just semantically. He always talks about the piston speeding up and slowing down, right? We're all aware of that. I don't want you to think about that way, or at least consider thinking about it my way. The reason I drew this line down here, kind of the old, is the dog wagging the tail or is the tail wagging the dog? On the downstroke, the piston isn't speeding up and slowing down because the piston is driving the crank. The crank is speeding up and slowing down in relationship to the piston and the mechanical advantage of the rod angle. Now, once you hit, we could claim this once you hit 97 degrees or wherever my exhaust is at and I quit making power, from that point on, inertia of the flywheels driving the piston, we're actually going to drive the crankshaft faster going down because it's over here, so we got a straighter mechanical advantage down to straight down. Now they'd claim that's the slowest part of the piston, so it's just backwards thinking of speeding up and slowing down the piston. Actually, we're speeding up the crank, and then when we get out here, we're not pushing the crank as far per degree because of the bias. So up in here, we're actually, the piston isn't moving faster, the crank is. We sped that up right down here, and from here up to here, it's going to slow down just a little bit. Speed up, slow down. Not necessarily in relation to the crank. I'm talking the crankshaft is going to speed up and then lose momentum while it's making compression. You guys pull over a saw, you guys know how much inertia. That crankshaft is basically having to pull that saw over every time. That's how much inertia you're taking out of the flywheel, is however much it takes you to crank that saw, that's how much inertia you're using to start that every time. Back here, we have, quote, sped that piston up in relationship to the crank on this side. On this side, we've sped the crank up in relationship to the piston, and we've done that due to mechanical advantage. So we sped the crank up over here and harnessed this power with a better mechanical advantage. Now on the back side of this, when it's shoving that piston up, and it's not taking near as much to shove that up and make this compression as it's doing firing here, so we'll sacrifice some of that mechanical advantage and actually speed that piston up in relationship to the crank. We'll sacrifice that mechanical advantage. It actually takes a little bit more inertia for this rod to work on this side and compress this, but the sacrifice between what we gain on this side and what we lose on this side shows pretty good on the dyno. Now the first thing you'll notice on this is I've got the old timing numbers here and the offset cylinder timing numbers here. And you guys will see I didn't just do the exhaust roof. I had to do exhaust open and exhaust closed, transfer open, transfers closed. And ignition 0 means the keys in it, whatever factory ignition was, whether that be 5 degrees advanced, 8 degrees advanced, 7 and 13/16 degrees advanced. I don't want to use fractions because they claim 4/3 of the people in the United States don't understand fractions anyway. But my exhaust opened at 97.5 degrees now and closed at 97. Transfers opened at 121. They closed at 120. The intake opened at 69. It closed at 68. The ignition was 1 degree advanced, meaning the cylinder had not quite reached top dead center by 1 degree when it fired. The blowdown, 23.5 degrees. The reverse blowdown, what's that? I'm going to tell you, is 23 degrees. Now, guys, if you don't want to start thinking about timing numbers any more in depth, and if you want to, skip around in this video anyway, but skip forward this part because I'm going to take this opportunity to give you a different way to think about timing. Not different. I shouldn't have said different. I'm going to give you a deeper way to think about timing because I want you to think about both sides of timing. I'm going to close this book, get it out of the way. Now I did this timing wheel 2 ways. I do everything off of top dead center. I actually made this. There's other numbers over here. I actually did this 363 degrees. So the intake opens, we'll say at 69. Well, the intake closes at 292 or 68 before top dead center. So you'll see both numbers there. That's what that means. Outer circle, hopefully, man, I hope this shows up. I took a lot of time drawing this. The outer circle is the exhaust. The middle circle, because it interacts with both the exhaust and the intake, the middle circle is the transfers, or the transfers is the transfers. The middle circle is the transfers, and the inner circle is the intake. Okay, let's start around with the exhaust. Okay, we'll start off, we've got, by moving that cylinder forward, we put 1 degree of advanced ignition timing in it, okay, because basically it moved top dead center forward 1 degree of the crankshaft rotation without moving the flywheel. It moved the crankshaft, or it moved the piston at top dead center 1 degree in accordance with where the flywheel, which dictates your ignition, is. Okay, so we'll say it fires here, and it's making a power stroke, and this is good. And I've got stuff marked good with a G and NFG. No friggin' good. We're at 97.5 degrees. And that's good. We like this. We like this exhaust being closed. The longer the better, right? The longer the better on the power stroke for harnessing power. The longer this is open, the better. Okay. Now, we put a 1/2 degree in that, which is good. We like on the power stroke. We like more exhaust timing. So we put a 1/2 degree on there by moving that cylinder forward. That was a gain. Okay. Now, the blowdown, we went from 97.5 to 121. We put approximately a 1/2 degree due to the piston changing speed in relation to the crankshaft. We put a 1/2 degree of blowdown in there, and I'm going to call that good. Okay, I like blowdown on this side because let's face it, the more blowdown you got on this side of the equation, the more time you have for burnt gases to get out, and before the new gases are coming in, which we'll get to that. And then the exhaust, we're still exhausting here. Now from here to here, the exhaust was going out under combustion pressure, right? And it's still going out under combustion chamber till we get to 180 degrees. And now's a good time to tell you, I did not take into consideration air's momentum. I know it's a factor. I'm not going to try to get into it because, number one, I ain't even smart enough to get into it. We're just going to say I'm smart enough to ignore it right now for this. So the exhaust is leaving to 180 degrees under combustion pressure. That's what's making it move. So after 180 degrees, the piston's moving up to 97 degrees before the exhaust closes. So in this area, the piston is moving gases out the exhaust due to the piston coming up. Okay, so the piston's doing good work right here. As a matter of fact, way more than 97 might be good, but we lose compression. You guys know that. So this is a good area in here because it's moving exhaust gases out. At 120 degrees, the transfers open. So once the transfers are closed, this is the area that your muffler gets to do some work. Hopefully we got a good charge of gas up here above the piston. The transfers are closed and the exhaust is still open. So right now is when that exhaust for this 23 degrees has a chance to shove that all back in and actually give a little bit more compression. Now we gained a 1/2 degree on this side on blowdown, but we'll say we lost a 1/2 degree here. We either lost a 1/2 degree here or gained a 1/2 degree here, however you want to look at it. And then at 97 degrees we begin compression again. Okay, now we'll call this good too. We want lots of dynamic compression here. The next thing we need to think about is the intake. Now I'm going to start, just for argument's sake, where the intake closes. Piston's coming down, the intake just closed. For 52 degrees of that rotation, we're compressing the intake charge, okay? Here's where blowdown's going to come into effect for you guys and me and everybody else. Besides just your exhaust, if you only got 18 degrees of blowdown, we just changed this case compression down to 49 degrees. Okay, that's NFG going the other way. Okay, so anyhow, we got 52 degrees of case compression. At that point, the transfer's open. So at that point, we're filling the transfers from 121 degrees down to 180 degrees because that piston's coming down, right? You're following me? Well, at 180 degrees, that piston actually changes directions and starts going back up, which is actually causing a void in this 60 degrees of NFG. We actually gained 1 degree of NFG on this. We put an extra degree of NFG here, so there's a drop. We put an extra degree of NFG in the transfers after the intake starts, or after the piston starts going the other way and causing a void under it, and before the transfers close. At some point, this could want to go the other way. That air could want to start bouncing back and following that void of that piston up. Okay, spit back. So, in that case, more transfer timing might be a good thing. See, that'd give us, if you look at it at both sides, you got to find the balance. But if we added 3 degrees of transfer timing, instead of being at 49 degrees of case compression, we'd actually be at 55 degrees of case compression. But it would take 3 degrees off the time we had to fill the cylinder, but it would also take 3 degrees off the NFG over here. It's just things to consider. Now, once the transfers closes, the cylinder's going up on the intake side. We have 52 degrees of rotation of this piston going up while the transfers are closed and while the intake's closed, to create 52 degrees of rotation of case vacuum before the intake opens back up. This is good. Then we got 68 degrees that is going up to top dead center. When the intake opens, it's got 68 degrees to fill the case before it starts coming back down, right? So it's got 68 degrees to fill that case. We actually lost a degree of that, and the more degrees you have here, the better, right? The more time you can fill that case. That's why they use reeds and stuff. Gives you more time to fill that case. In a window-ported piston, not so much. So we lost a degree of case fill in the bottom of that cylinder due to the offset timing. We're still taking in intake charge. We have some speed of that air coming in, but where's that peter out? I don't know. So we've got the intake open, and we're sucking in air, but the piston's actually coming back down, countering that. It's no longer causing a void. It's filling the void, causing a pressure, while the intake's trying to come in. So we got 69 degrees of NFG. That's not good movement. We don't like that movement. So on the intake side, we lost a degree of good up here and took away a degree of good over here. Now at bottom dead center, it's just the opposite. So our intake suffered a little bit by moving that cylinder forward. But we still gained power. Now, the transfers, like I say, the case compression, we kind of already hit on this. Now we're back around to coming back down again. We've got 69 degrees between top dead center and when the intake closes, so we're actually going the wrong way for if it was fluid hydraulics. It's not, as air, so we got a little bit of momentum we can use, but there's a balance. And back down to case compression. Now that 52% of 52 degrees of case compression, that's where, and I think I've already touched on it, so I'll probably edit it out. We got time to fill. I think I already hit it. Hell, stop, cut.